What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk to you about a graphic novel that I recently finished reading, The Fantastic Four John Byrne Visionaries Volume 5. This collects Fantastic Four issue 268 through 275, Annual 18, and The Thing issue 19. And something that I have recently been enjoying about John Byrne's run on the Fantastic Four, this is something that probably in the back of my mind, I was noticing it as early as the third volume in his run, and definitely I was starting to pick up on it in volume 4. But the thing that I really enjoyed the most about what John Byrne has been doing is that he is able to find a good balance between the old spirit of the Fantastic Four from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, while also able to take these characters and do new things with them. Almost everybody who ever works on these characters, they always talk about how they want to return them to the way they were under Stan and Jack. They always say they want to take things back to the way they were done in the 60s. They want to do the things the way they were done when Stan and Jack were writing these characters. And, you know, that sounds all good in theory, but it sounds also kind of problematic because back in the 1960s, the Fantastic Four was the one comic book that was really pushing boundaries. It was doing things that no other comic book was doing. While every other superhero can't even reveal their secret identity to their girlfriend, the Fantastic Four doesn't even have secret identities. While every other superhero is out there just dating their girlfriend, the Fantastic Four, they're off getting married. The Fantastic Four was really pushing the envelope back in the 1960s. And the fact that pretty much everyone since Stan Lee and Jack Kirby finished their run back in the 60s has basically just wanted to maintain what those two creators were doing, you know, at this point 20 years earlier. That's kind of problematic. And John Byrne, if you'll recall, I did not actually like his run when I first started reading it. The first 2 volumes of his run, I wasn't crazy about those volumes. It really took him a while to kind of sink me in and get me hooked on his run. And now I'm loving it. And like I said, he's able to take the old feeling of this series, the familial vibe that was going on when Lee and Kirby were doing the book. He's able to take that feeling and also infuse it with a sense of new. He's able to take the Thing and leave him on an alien planet and replace him with She-Hulk. That happened at the tail end of the previous volume, but She-Hulk didn't really do anything in the previous volume. In this volume, she's actually pretty active, and her defining character trait here, and I mentioned before in my review of the previous volume that I'm not a huge fan of She-Hulk. I really like her in this volume because what she's doing here, almost every issue that she's in, she'll do something and she says, I have to impress the Fantastic Four. I have to make them realize that I'm a valuable part of this group just like every other one of them are. And then she usually winds up messing things up in some way. And that's kind of cute, the way she's kind of klutzy. Not really klutzy like she's like Clark Kent klutzy, not like that, but like she's trying to impress everybody and she takes it too far unintentionally and she winds up messing up in some way. Like there's one point, it's in the annual, when they are on the moon and she jumps, trying to jump after this bad guy, and she forgets that the gravity is much less on the moon, and so she almost jumps out of the atmosphere, and she does stuff like that, and I think that's a really good handle on her character because this is someone who has been superheroing for quite a while. She had her own solo book in the 70s, and then she was a member of the Avengers for a little while, and now she's a member of the Fantastic Four. So she's not a rookie by any means, but it makes a lot of sense that she's jumping into this team, and they've been together forever. They all know each other very well, and they work together very well, and she's wanting that with them. She wants to be able to work together very well with them, but she doesn't know them very well. She hasn't been working with them that long, so she's trying too hard, and I like that. It makes her feel like a real person. It gives her flaws, but it doesn't make her unlikable. I find She-Hulk here to be more likable than I've seen her in any other book that I've read her in. And so I was really enjoying what they were doing with She-Hulk. Also, another new thing that John Byrne does, he introduces the romance between Johnny Storm and Alicia Masters. For some reason, I thought that this romance had actually started earlier than Byrne's run, but I'm not a big expert on the Fantastic Four. I knew that these two had been a couple at some point in the past, past, but I didn't know when it happened. And that starts in this volume. And Johnny Storm has kind of been going through a few different women over the course of John Byrne's run. There was Frankie Ray, who eventually became Galactus's next herald, and then there was another girl, Julie Angel, who was a couple volumes ago, and I actually can't remember what it was, the reason that they broke it off. But finally, now that the Thing is in outer space, Johnny and Alicia, more or less, they accidentally become a couple. And it's a little weird how that happens. If I have one complaint about this volume, it's that their relationship kind of just happens way too fast. In the second issue of this book, which is the annual, Johnny and pretty much all the Fantastic Four, except for Alicia, are, and of course she's not a member of the Fantastic Four, but the actual members of the Fantastic Four, they are on the moon about to witness, I guess, the wedding between Black Bolt and Medusa, although I was under the impression that they were already married. But they're there to witness this wedding between these two, and Johnny is there, and this Inhuman girl starts to flirt with him, and then he's like, oh, hey, how you doing, and just kind of ignores her, and Reed is even over on the side saying, wow, Johnny's ignoring that girl who was flirting with him, which is very funny to me because Reed does not strike me as the kind of guy who would be able to pick up on when a girl is flirting with another guy, but he's saying, I wonder why Johnny is not picking up on that, why he's not, chasing after that girl, and then he thinks that maybe he's still hung up on Crystal, who is Medusa's sister and Johnny's ex-girlfriend. But then Johnny's over here thinking, it'd be really great if Alicia was here. She'd really enjoy this. And I feel like it happens way too fast, and it'd be nice if in previous volumes of the series, while the Thing was still on Earth, if Johnny and Alicia had been forming a platonic friendship while the Thing was still here dating Alicia, and then whenever he decides to stay behind on Battleworld, which is where the Secret Wars miniseries took place, then these two have already got a friendship, and then maybe he can start to percolate in the back of his mind, hey, Alicia, she's kind of a nice girl, maybe I should give that a shot. And then after a few issues, maybe she's like, you know what, Johnny's been being really nice to me, I never thought of him in that way. And I feel like here it just happens too fast. I like the idea of these two being a couple. I know there's people out there who think it's a little weird, and maybe it is a little weird just because Alicia had been dating the Thing for like 20 years, and nobody ever really thought of her as getting together with anyone else. But when you take the Thing out of the equation, as this book is wont to remind us a couple of times, a lot of people consider Alicia Masters to be Alicia Masters' girlfriend of the Thing, and they don't consider her to be Alicia Masters' human being who is her own person. And I think separating her from the Thing and then putting her in a relationship with Johnny, that was a good move, and it was good for her and it was good for Johnny. And I know they're not going to last long together. I've read other Fantastic Four comics set after Byrne's run where they are not dating anymore, and I'm not looking forward to the moment where they break up because I really am enjoying their relationship that is starting to happen and be explored in this volume. Other than that, there's a lot of really fun stuff going on here. This is a lot of really exciting adventures that, to be honest, Byrne was doing these exciting adventures as far back as Volume 1. It's just that in Volume 1 and 2, I felt like those adventures were too much of a throwback to the 1960s, and he wasn't doing enough of his own thing. And I think by now, now that he's shaken up the relationship of Alicia Masters and he's added the She-Hulk to the team, I feel like he's starting to find his own thing. One thing that I mentioned at the very end of the my review of the previous volume, Sue Storm, she had a miscarriage. She and Reed were pregnant, and they lost the baby. And I was kind of concerned that the book was going to take a really dark turn, and that it wasn't going to be the fun, lighthearted adventure book that the Fantastic Four is known for, because two of the characters lose the baby. And obviously you don't want to make light of that. You don't want to immediately after these two characters go through a tragedy say, okay, now it's time to forget all of that. We're going to have these characters go back into having fun adventures and smiling and making cracks and stuff like that. No, you have to be careful about that, and I think John Byrne does a really good job of that. For the first couple of issues, they're not brooding on it. They're definitely sad that they lost a baby, but they're also trying to make a brave face because they have a son and they don't want him to be worried about what's going on with his parents. So they're trying to keep a brave face for him, and they're also trying to move on with their lives. And that sounds really cynical, really what's the word I'm looking for? Just really mean and heartless, but that's not the way that this book plays it. They are still mourning the death of their unborn child, but they're trying to move on with their lives and try to get back to the way things were, while also not forgetting the loss that they have had. And I think this book does a really good job of having these characters act in a very human way. At one point, Reed, She-Hulk, and a supporting character named Wyatt Wingfoot, who, if I'm not mistaken, was introduced in the 60s. I don't know much about him. I think he was friends with Johnny Storm, but here he's sort of the unofficial fifth member of the Fantastic Four. But those guys, they go off to have their own adventure, and Reed is like, Sue, you need to stay here. You recently lost a baby. It may not be safe for you. And she kind of just throws a fit. She destroys Reed's lab. Basically, she is just in a fury that Reed is treating her like she's not important, like she's not an equally valid member of the Fantastic Four. And that's a very valid thing for her to be feeling after all this has been going on. And I think that, again, in the same way that Byrne handles She-Hulk, I think he's handling these characters. They have flaws, both Reed and Sue, but they also feel human, and they don't feel unlikable because of those flaws. And that is a tightrope that is not easy to walk. There have been plenty of professional comic book writers out there and artists who try to make their characters flawed, and what they wind up doing is they just make the characters unlikable, and they make me not want to read about those characters because they're unlikable. And Byrne does not do that. All of these characters in this book are very likable, while they feel very flawed and very human, but they still feel very likable, and I really like that about this book. I don't have a whole lot more to say about this volume. You do get, for the first time, you get to see Reed Richards' father, Nathaniel Richards, who, in later adventures, like in the 1990s and even the 2000s, Nathaniel is played very heartless. Like, this is science, just pure science, no emotion behind it. Kind of like what a lot of people think of as Reed Richards. Like, if you took away all of the humanity from Reed Richards, that's how a lot of people write Nathaniel Richards, and that's not how he's written here. He's not in the book a whole lot, but when he does start to interact with the Fantastic Four, he acts a lot like Reed. And so I'm very curious, and I don't know if I'll ever find this out, but I'm very curious at what point Nathaniel Richards started being written more as just a heartless, all about the science, all about the cold hard facts kind of character. I'm very curious when he started being written in that way in this series, because at the end of this little two-part story where they go to this alternate reality, which is probably one of my favorite stories in this run so far, I found myself at the end of that story wishing that it was actually a three-parter, and that we could have explored some of the socio-politics going on in that world in a third part of that story. But at the end of that story, Nathaniel is saying, listen, I know that Reed is my son, and I haven't seen him in 20 years, but I have to stay here. I have another son. By the way, Marvel, whatever happened to Nathaniel's other son, Reed's half-brother, who was born in that alternate reality? I would really like to know what happened to that little baby. But he's saying, you know, I have a life here, and even though something has happened here, something kind of tragic has happened in that world, I won't go into spoilers, but I still have to stay here, and I still have to make my life here matter, make it count, make it work. And so I'm very curious what circumstances caused Nathaniel Richards to, A, become more of a heartless machine when later we see him, and B, what made him want to come back to the regular Marvel 616 timeline and leave that life that he had there on that other world. But I'm sure we won't find that out in John Byrne's run. I have a feeling that he's not going to be bringing Nathaniel Richards back in the rest of the volumes of this run. But overall, I highly enjoyed this book, and this run is really starting to grab me. I feel kind of silly that I didn't give this run more of a chance when I first started, and I still feel like if I went back and reread Volume 1, that it wouldn't do it for me as much as these other volumes. But I can definitely see now that I'm 5 volumes in, I can definitely very easily see why people are so in love with this run, because most of this run is really fantastic. It's just the beginning of it that it takes a pretty long time for it to really get going and really become the run that is really well-loved, and rightly so. So I like this volume. I hope that you guys like this video. I hope that I have maybe convinced you to go and check this run out, specifically this volume, and I hope that if you guys did like this video, you will like, share, comment, and subscribe, and if you did like this video, be sure to comment. Tell me that you did like it, and I will see you guys later in the week with some other videos. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.